Shalom, my friends from the heartland of Israel. What great again to come together today, learn about the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, about a practical daily halacha. First of all, I want to send you all greetings and love and blessings from the land of Israel, because from Zion, the Torah will go out throughout all over the world. And today, when you're watching somewhere in the world this message, it's the blessing of the Torah, it's the blessing of Hashem that is coming your way. In this series about the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, we're learning about practical, applicable halacha that are practical laws, practical rules, how to apply Torah in a daily life. Of course, a lot of things that we learn in Torah, we try to understand on a spiritual level. But Torah was not written just as a storybook or as a spiritual book. The Torah was also written as a practical book. The Torah gives us Jews in the land of Israel, even outside of Israel, gives us a practical guide how we should live our lives in all kind of different situations. How should we behave, and how should we judge, and how should we look at things, and how should we do practical things. And it's like every country in the world that has his rules and his laws. Also, the land of Israel has its rules and laws. And the difference is that in Israel, those rules and laws are also connected in to our daily relationship with Hashem. So it gives us not only practical guidance in the normal, regular daily things we do, like driving a car, of what should we do when an accident happens, etc. But it gives us also instructions how we can perform Torah in a practical daily basis. So we already have done 45 chapters, and today we're going to continue with chapter 46. And chapter 46 is about, let's see, where were we? My goodness. Laws pertaining to forbidden foods. A lot of those laws we learn directly from the Torah. And also a lot of those laws we learn from the oral Torah. As we see in the parasha of this week, Parasha Toledot, in chapter 26, verse 5, it says, when Hashem does his promise to Yitzchak to stay in the land and not to go out of the land when there was a famine, and he says to Yitzchak, don't go to Egypt, stay in the promised land, stay in Canaan. And then he repeats his blessing. He says, I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will increase your offspring like the stars of the heavens, and I will give to your offspring all these lands, and all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring. All the nations of the world will be blessed by the offspring of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov through Israel. And why? Because Abraham Avinu, our founder father of Am Israel, obeyed, Hashem says, obeyed my voice and observed my safeguards, my commandments, my edicts, and my Torah. So we learn from this that even Abraham Avinu, though the physical Torah was yet not given to Am Israel, but Abraham Avinu, through his relationship with Hashem and his what Hashem taught him and what Abraham learned from Shem is a lot of mitzvot from the Torah, a lot of chukim and mishpatim, and he obeyed the voice of Hashem. He observed the safeguards of Hashem, the commandments, and my Torahs. In Ivrit, by Ivrit it says, let's see where it starts. Ekef asher shema Avraham bekoli beyishmor mismarti mitzvatai chukotai betoratai. And Toratai is plural. It's two Torahs. It's not one Torah. And which Torahs obeyed Abraham Avinu? Well, we know now that Moshe Rabbeinu received the written Torah, but he received from Hashem also the oral Torah. And the oral Torah gives expression and explanation to the written Torah. And when Moshe Rabbeinu taught every day the Torah to Am Israel, 40 years long in the desert, in the Bemidbar, he taught them the written Torah and he explained them the oral Torah, and those explanations were passed on from father to child. First from Moshe Rabbeinu to Aaron, to his sons, to the elders, and then to the people of Israel. And from then on, every generation taught the next generation the I forget the word, the oral Torah, the Torah Baal Peh. So an extension or an present day, a modern application of the Torah and of the oral Torah, how should we implement the Torah in our daily lives, is written and is written in short in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. So the laws pertaining to forbidden foods. The blood found in eggs is forbidden. We're not allowed to eat blood. And when we find blood in an egg, we cannot eat all the egg. So what we do is when we want to fry eggs, we break the eggs one by one in a bowl. And we use a second bowl. So we break them in one bowl, one egg. When it's okay, we put it in the next bowl. Then we take the second egg, we break it, we put it in the first bowl, we check it. If it's okay, we put them together in the other bowl, and so on. If you want more eggs, one by one, you break them apart in a bowl. When the egg is okay, when there's no blood in the egg, you can combine it with the other eggs. Because if you would not do that, and the 10th egg you break it immediately in the bowl where all the eggs are, then all the 10 eggs will be forbidden. So in order to not to do that, we break them one by one apart. Also, we try, if possible, to buy white eggs, because we know that white eggs contain less often a blood speck in the egg. If you are eating something, for example, bread, and accidentally you bite on the gum on the inside of your mouth, and there will be blood in your mouth, then you cannot swallow that blood, and you can also not swallow the food that is mixed with that blood. So you should put out the food away. You should wash your mouth with water until it stopped, and then you can continue eating. Um, Occasionally, blood is found in milk. That would be if you have fresh milk from the cow and there would be blood in it. Um, then it depends on how much and when, etc. it happened, and you should consult your rabbi. A mixture of meat and milk is forbidden by the Torah. We cannot eat cooked milk, cooked meat together, but also not uncooked milk and meat together. So the Torah says that it is forbidden to cook the meat of a calf in the milk of his mother. But what was meant by that? What was the cultural habit of the people back then? Well, we learn a few things from the oral Torah. One of the things is that probably in those times the idol worshippers did practices like slaughtering young animals and cook them in the milk of their mother. And Hashem doesn't want us to eat blood first. He doesn't want us to uh, eat a mixture of milk and meat. It is considered unhealthy. It's by the Torah considered unhealthy. So we don't do it. And even if we see like it's not we are not allowed to take when the calf is not a young calf, not yet ready a year, to take the mother away and to murder or to slaughter the mother in front of the calf or vice versa. So there we have to have a certain respect for the animals. That's one, but the spiritual uh, uh, meaning of not eating bread, milk, and meat together is that it is unhealthy for us. Um, so there are a few regulations about what you should do. For example, if a drop of milk fell in a mixture of meat, or if a drop of meat fell in a mixture of milk. The general rule we hold is that if what happened is less than 1/60th, then it should not be a problem. But again, you should consult your rabbi in order to know if your specific situation is allowed to eat or not allowed to eat. Of course, when a drop of a small piece of meat fell into a mixture of milk or butter or whipped cream, and it's less than 1/60th of the cream, you can take it out and you can continue using the cream. But there are all of variations. If it's 1/60th of the whipped cream or not the whipped cream, of a sauce, of not a sauce, of a soup, where the milk falls in, or is it a bowl with fresh meat where the drop of milk falls in? What should we do? Um, so for all those details, you have to consult your rabbi. But in general, it's forbidden to try uh, to have benefits from that mixture, and also to eat it, and more even to eat a mixture. Two Jews who know each other, 6, even though if they are very critical of each other, They are forbidden to eat at the same table if one eats meat and the other dairy food. So in general, you cannot have two different uh, plates, menus on the table, unless there is a clear, clear, noticeable mark between them. So, for example, if one eats at one side of the table and the other one eats at the other side of the table, and in between, in the middle of the table, is even a bowl of fruit, then it's very clear that one food is not mixing with the food of the other at the other part of the table. They're clearly two parts of the table. Yes. We must also be careful to when we eat bread that we don't bread with meat, that the bread we are eating is not made with milk, because then we're also mixing milk with meat. And so we have to be certain that the bread we eat is not made with milk. So if you, and even if you use one bread with dairy meals, it's better to continue using the rest of the bread also for dairy meals. Or if you use one bread for a meat meal on Shabbat, it's better to finish the bread also with meat meals and not use the leftovers with milk meals. So just to avoid a forbidden mixture. It's customary to mark your knives, which knives are halavi, milk, milchi, and which knives and forks and spoons are basari, are fleshy, or are meat. So we have two sets of utensils for the table, and we also in the kitchen have two sets of utensils for meat, utensils for milk, and we don't mix them. And a lot of fellow Jews even have a third set of utensils for parve. So as long as the utensils and the thing you are cutting is cold and is not a sharp food like hot pepper or lemon or onion, when you make a mistake and you cut then like a lettuce or an apple with a meat knife, well, that's no problem if you cut it with a meat knife. I mean, like a cheese. If you have a cold knife, it's a basari, a meat knife, and you would use it. It's clean, it's washed, and it's cold, and you use it to cut something like cake or a piece of cheese. It's not directly a problem. When the knife is warm, it is a problem, or when the knife is not clean and it has on it residue from onion or from lemon that is sharp and that activates the possibility to spread meat and milk products, then we have a problem. And then there's also regulation. For example, if you use a meat knife that was not clean or it's still warm, and you cut a piece of cheese with it, you cannot eat the cheese which you cut, and the cheese, even you have to cut a little bit extra of the cheese that is left over in order that the spreading of the, let's say, infection of the meat into the cheese will not come in your mouth. So you cut a little piece away of also of the cheese and you throw it away. Of course, then you have to kasher your knife again, because it was warm, so the meat knife and the milk from the cheese has gone into the molecules of the metal of the knife, so you have to kasher it. And when you have done that, you can use it again for meat, of course. So the key difference is it warm, the knife or the product, or is it both cold? And also, are you cutting something that is sharp, considered sharp, like hot peppers or lemon or onion, or like not sharp, like soft foods? But in order to avoid, mark them. Also plates. We have, during the week, we use blue plates for milk products like a bread with cheese. And we use red plates for food with meat. You can choose. You are not obligated to choose blue and red, but regularly those colors are considered correctly. If you ate meat or even a dish prepared with meat, you may not eat dairy food for 6 hours. So there are different minhagim. The general rule is if you have eaten meat, you have to wait 6 hours before you can eat milk. And some hold 3 hours, and the Dutch even have a ruling from their rabbis that they only have to wait 1 hour after eating meat before they can eat something from milk. You cannot switch as you like. You should keep to the custom, and you should keep to the tradition where you were born or where you were raised in Judaism. And the only one that can change this tradition is when a young woman marries a husband that has a different tradition concerning, for example, the food and waiting for eating something, a milchi halavi after basari. She changes it to the tradition of her husband. The other way around, if you ate cheese or drank milk, you can eat meat after it, but you have to wash your mouth. Be sure that there's no meat or meat residue anymore in your mouth. The reason why we can eat easily meat after milk or milk products and not the other way around is because meat takes very long hours to digest, first in our stomach and then in our intestines. And milk takes a very short time. The moment milk touches our stomach, it touches the acids in our stomach, it's immediately broken down. So when the milk is broken down already in our stomach, already after a few minutes, is not considered milk anymore because of the separation the body does in different nutritions. Meat, on the other way, takes a very long time to break down. So that's why we cannot drink halavi or eat halavi products after eating meat for a certain set of hours, but we can, after drinking milk or eating cheese, immediately eat something of meat afterwards. But don't forget, wash your mouth first. Of course, also at the table, let's say you're on a Shabbat table, you cannot use the same plates or the same utensils, forks and knives or bowls, whatever, for meat and milk the same. So if you are having a Shabbat meal and you're starting with some kind of creamy soup that contains a little bit of cream, you can start with it. And after you ate the soup and the cream, you should take away the bowls, the soup, the knives, the forks, whatever you used. And even if you ate bread together with that soup, you should take the bread which you used with the milk products away. And for the meat course of the meal, you take a new bread. Mm. Wine, meat, or a piece of fish that does not have a distinguishing mark that you entrust or send with a non-Jewish messenger, and certainly if you send it with a non-Jewish observant, you must have a double seal. So in Israel, all the meat and the products have a hesher, has a seal on it that it's checked by rabbis from the Rabbanut, that those are prepared in a kosher way and that it's okay to eat them. If it's saying parve, it's parve, and not if it's saying halavi, it's halavi. If it's saying basari, it's basar, it's meat. But if you send your products with somebody and that somebody is a non-Jewish person, you should double check the products that come into your house if they still are closed, were not opened in the meantime, and that it has still the stamp or the seal of the Rabbanut on it. Of course, if it's brought by you, by your fellow Jew, you know he keeps Torah, then you can also trust him that the food he brings is perfectly okay. You can entrust each other for it. We must take care when we are making food. Maybe there's a festival or something, and Jews and non-Jews are on the same festivals, providing food, that you don't put your cooking utensils and your stove next to the non-Jew, because it could be that accidentally there would be a mix-up in utensils or food products, nutritions, and then your food would not be considered kosher anymore. It's also forbidden to buy wine or other doubtful food from somebody who is not recognized as keeping Shabbat or who is a non-Jew, and not keeping a kasher and Shabbat, and or is not a Jew. If bread was baked together with meat in a same oven and the oven was closed and the meat was uncovered, then you cannot eat that bread anymore with dairy foods. That's partly what we already discussed. However, if the meat was covered and you bake your or the oven was open and you have a large oven and there could not be any contamination from the meat to the bread is permitted also with dairy foods. Nevertheless, initially, you should take care not to roast meat in an oven in which bread is being baked, not to do it together. So what we do is, to be sure, we bake the bread in a meat oven, but without meat in it, of course. And we know that the bread we use, we baked for Shabbat, the chalot, we use for meat meals. and so not in order not to mix up. If your oven is clean and you didn't bake it together, then of course you are allowed to eat it together. A bread also with a milk product, but it's preferable not to do so. So if you can bake bread in a neutral oven, it would be better for both foods. And if you're only having halavi meals, bake your bread in the halavi oven, of course. But maybe you don't have halavi or multiple ovens, then you should kasher your oven every time you bake or halavi or meat products in it. And you have to be also careful that the oven is clean when you bake bread in it. So, for example, you are making meat and it's all the spats, the spats, how do you say that in English, come to the sides of the oven. You have to clean it because then there is residue of meat in the oven. Or likewise, if you're making something with milk or cream in it and it over boils and it comes on the bottom or on the sides of the oven and you want to put afterwards meat in it, you have to clean the oven first and to kasher the oven. Cooked food cooked by a non-Jew is forbidden for us, even if you know he knows the rules of Shabbat, unless you were part of the cooking. So if a non-Jew cooks with kosher utensils in your kitchen, and you have cut some of the food, you know he knows the rules, he know the halachot, or you have stirred in the pan, you have lit the fire of the gas. All those actions makes you not only a participant in preparing of the food, it makes you the head owner, the head preparer of the food, and the non-Jew will be like your kind of assistant under your supervision, and then he can finish the cooking if again, if you trust him that he or she knows the halachot of the kashrut. Let's see. It's forbidden to eat fruits that have worms in it. Some consider it okay to cut away the piece of the fruit of the apple, for example, where the worm or the fly or the whatever insect was in it or there. But most of us prefer not to eat the apple or the fruit at all. Uh, just not to eat it. We are not allowed to eat worms. That's one, and it's also not healthy for us. We should sift our foods thoroughly. I know present day time when all the food is packed in plastic or other materials, usually the food is okay when it arrives at our home. And there are also different uh, different kinds of nou vergeet ik het woord weer. Different kind of hashes on the products that show us which are more thoroughly checked than others. But what we do and what in order to check our food is when we eat rice or dry fruits, dry vegetables like beans or peas, we put them on a plate or on a great sieve and we check if there are no irregularities in it. And if so, we take them out. So if we find 1 or 2 worms in the rice, we take them out. Bezrat Hashem, it will never happen. But if there are 3 or 4 or 5 worms or little insects in the rice, we throw it away. It's not considered anymore kosher to eat, even if we took it out. Flour, we sift. The salt, the sugar, we check it. Other products, we check it. We see if there are not any irregularities in it or animals or something. I once thought the rice was okay, and when I cooked it and it was ready, I saw that there were all like little, very little black spots in the rice, and it happened that there were like mini insects in it that were not really visible for the eye, but when we cooked it, they turned not as white as the rice, so then you could see them, and we had to throw away all the rice, and we had to clean and to kasher the the pan. Of course, disinfect in order not to get sick also. So a lot of those mitzvot uh, are given by us. All those mitzvot are given by us through the Torah and the oral Torah, and taught by us, by the rabbis. And a lot of those laws are first for physical health, or let me say second for physical health and first for spiritual health. Why can we not eat blood? Because in the blood is the soul of the animal, and we are not allowed to mix our soul with the soul of somebody else. It's like we cannot do it. So we cannot eat the soul of another living being. That's why we don't eat the blood, because Hashem says in the blood there is the soul. If we open nuts like walnuts, you have to be careful that there are not mites in it, little small insects. And bananas and not other kind of nuts or dry fruits. Always check them. When you eat a dried fig, which are very delicious, I'd like the dried figs that are not so dry yet, but are like a little moisty, dried, but not fresh anymore. So dried and soft. But we open the fig, or we open the tamar, and then we look into the fruit if there's nothing in it, and when there's nothing in it, of course we say the bracha, and then we put it in our mouth. Yes. Many divine commandments are written in the Torah regarding insects, which to eat and which we are not allowed to eat. And many transgress, and one who eats them transgresses many prohibitions, many negative commandments. But the worst thing that happened is that it infects our soul. So the food we eat is interconnected. Our body and our intestines, our how do you call it? Our intestines and our stomach and the energy the body takes out of the food and gives to the body, etc. It's all connected to our soul. So if we eat one of the forbidden foods, it affects negatively our souls. it affects negatively our connection with Hashem. And we should be aware of it. Of course, we know that some foods are more considered more healthier, just as in a nutrition, like healthier for us than others, and some meats are considered not healthy for us because they're very fat, or they have other things in the meat that are not good for us. But the most important thing is that Hashem decided that some meats are not good for us. Doesn't matter if they taste nicely or they taste not nicely. It's not has nothing to do about the taste, but it has to do about our soul. And in order to keep our soul healthy and to keep our soul connected to our Creator, we should not eat all those forbidden foods, and we should be careful in what to do if in one way or another there was a possible transgression of one of those halachot. For the non-Jew, there are a few regulations, mitzvot. The basic ones are the 7 mitzvot of Noach, and a non-Jew has also forbidden to eat blood, and he cannot eat a part of an animal that is torn off a living animal. So even if you are not a Jew, the meat you eat it from an animal that was killed first, and then was it slaughtered, then you can eat the part of the meat that you want. But there may not be any cruelty involved in how the meat was prepared, how the animal was killed, etc. But if you feel connected to Torah, if you're a non-Jew and you're correct, you feel connected to the Torah and you feel connected to the halachot, it would be advisable to learn from the Torah that there are certain foods that are not healthy to eat, not healthy for your body and not healthy for your soul. And considering the foods and meat, the meat that we eat, it has to be slaughtered according to the Torah. So what does the Torah say about meat slaughtered concerning Torah? That we should do it as Moshe Rabbeinu instructed us. But in the written Torah, the instruction is not there. But we know how we slaughter animals. We slaughter them by a shochet, a licensed slaughterer. Butcher is not the right word. A licensed professional who knows how to slaughter. He has to have very, very sharp knives, and he has instructions for different animals how to cut their throat in one slice, and to let the blood flow out as quick as possible, and how to clean the meat in certain kind of ways. We spoke already about it, in order that it will be ready for us to eat. Then there's considered no blood anymore in the meat. And how do we know all those instructions? Because Moshe told us when he said, you have to slaughter it concerning to Torah. And then the people said, but you say this, but it's not written how exactly. That's correct. Moshe explained it. The oral Torah, and from the oral Torah we know exactly how to prepare, how to slaughter animals. There are a lot of different rulings or exceptions. There are a lot of small details that we didn't cover today. You should not hesitate to consult your Rav concerning these things, what is allowed, what is not allowed, and what to do if you're doubting. If you are doubting if something is good for you or not good for you, if you still can eat it, if you, for example, contaminated meat with a drop of milk and you're not sure if you can eat it or not can eat it, then my advice is, if you're doubting, don't do it. Wait until you have the possibility to ask. Because if you're doubting and you continue eating or doing, and afterwards you find out it was not good for you, then you broke the law. It was not allowed, then you broke Torah. And that's also not healthy for us to break Torah laws. Toda Rabbah for the coffee, Anna. If it's hot, or is there some cold water in it also? Okay. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Delicious. Great. We cover today only chapter 46. Next time we are going to talk about chapter 47, laws pertaining to non-Jewish wine and the method of kosering, purging utensils in which it was held. And then we continuing about the laws on of berachot, blessings on the food. Very interesting, because we have different kind of berachot for different kind of foods. And it's good to know which to pray for what, and which to bless and which to thank for what, and how to bless or how to thank for our foods. Great. It was fantastic to learn together today, and I hope you learned something from it also. And if not, if you're still don't understand, just reread it or re-listen and talk about it with each other, or ask your Rav, if you have questions about specific situations about preparing food, of course. But it's just great to be aware of every time again of that all these things we learn are for the health of our soul, not only for our body, but mostly for the health of our soul. And Hashem cares for us. He wants the best for us. And he wants our souls completely. He wants pure souls dedicated to him, not only dedicated by Torah study, but dedicated in all the things that we do in a daily life. Okay, for now, Leitrahot, Shabbat Shalom, and until next time. Bye-bye.